Thank you, everybody, for being here. We're excited about this webinar and this grant program. As you know, we mentioned this at the training in Topeka in February and had to work through some issues, mainly related to funding. We didn't have the $500,000 that we expected, but we've got $250,000, so we're moving ahead with that. And the issue with the short timeline, just so you know ahead of time before we get into the actual presentation, is we need to get this kind of taken care of for fiscal purposes to get the grants actually awarded to specific communities. We thought we could encumber the entire amount and make awards after the first of the fiscal year, but we can't do that. We actually have to make the awards to the specific recipients before the end of the fiscal year. So that's the reason for the short timeline. So I appreciate everybody being here today. You all know Debbie and Robert. We're all excited to be here. And this is going to be a fairly quick webinar. Hopefully you all have that RFP and kind of the outline of the grant program. We're not going to read through that thing. We're just going to touch on some of the highlights and drop a couple of links in the chat as we go, and then be here to answer questions and talk about anything you want to talk about related to the grant program. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. We're excited that we have this opportunity. As you know, we've been proponents of upper floor housing in your downtowns since the program came back in late 2019. We've done a couple of upper floor housing workshops. We've worked with code officials nationally to try and move this narrative along and get more folks developing upper floor spaces, because we think it might be a small role, but we are convinced that upper floor housing in Main Street districts can play a role in solving our housing issues in Kansas. So we're excited about this opportunity. So the Rooms grant program is designed to encourage renovation upper floor housing or upper floor areas of your commercial buildings with the idea of creating new housing opportunities. And this isn't specifically noted in the RFP outline, but these are for regular housing, like long-term housing, not Airbnbs. Okay, so that's not defined in the program, but the Airbnb thing is not part of this. Now, if you have an opportunity that you think, just absolutely has to be an Airbnb for some reason, let us know. And that brings up a point that I want to emphasize. Unlike some other grant programs, we do have some flexibility to work with you, mainly because it's a short time frame and a smaller grant program right now. So if you have any questions or opportunities that we're not talking about today, or you feel like might be a little bit outside of the boundaries of what's defined in the grant program, definitely reach out to us and talk to us about that. We would rather know about that and work with you to maybe make that happen than just to say no. So these grants are only available to active designated Main Street communities. So, and the application portal is very similar to HEAL. So if you've applied for HEAL grants in the past, the application portal will look very similar. It's insubmittable. So if you've got an account created there, you should be good to go. And so that shouldn't be anything new to you. I also want to mention, as it relates to HEAL, that if you have applied for a HEAL grant that was for upper floor housing, use those application, not the exact application, but use that project to apply for a grant with Rooms. For this round, there's a total of at least $250,000 available. Each community is eligible for one $50,000 grant. If you have more than one project, please apply. I know that would mean more work to you, and we're saying that only one grant can be awarded per community, but we want to make sure these funds get out. So if we have 4 grant applications, for example, and a community has maybe 2, that it's possible that that could be awarded. Also, you notice that it says at least $250,000. We've talked about this internally, and if there is a request for, say, $300,000 or $350,000, we can probably come up with a couple more grant opportunities this round, but we have at least $250,000. So we expect that money to be spent, and that there's enough projects out there to use those funds.
And
But
they're
again,
good projects, right, Scott? I mean, that's
right.
the other thing is sometimes there'll be a taper off in the quality of the projects, but if we have 6 good projects, we have some discretion to add to it.
Like Heal, there's a minimum of 1-to-1 match required, and if you have more, that helps your case. But again, the process is very similar to Heal, so if you're familiar with that, you should be good to go. And then no cash or in-kind matches allowed. That includes things like sweat equity or equipment or other materials that might be donated. These funds need to go to actual construction costs and materials that you're paying for as part of the project.
Eligible use of funds, projects must be for upper floor development in privately owned buildings within the designated downtown district. So for instance, a city building would not be, or city owned building would not be eligible for HEAL. And it should be really within your Main Street footprint as you have defined it with us previously. We've gotten a little loose with that on some HEAL projects, but we really want to see these in the downtown district as you guys have defined it yourselves. Projects must follow local Main Street guidelines and follow local code. I would also say that if you, in the absence of local Main Street guidelines, we'll use the state guidelines. And as far as codes, we want to make sure that we're getting on top of that early in these projects so we don't have a $100,000 surprise because of some code changes that need to be made after we've already awarded the grant. So make sure you're working with your local code officials up front, that you guys know that you can do these projects and you're not going to have issues with them. Also, we have some tricks of dealing with some codes, things like using the international existing building code, and you need to find out if that's been adopted locally. Work must not have already begun except for clearing out the building in preparation for construction. We've got into some issues with SHPO because some work that didn't meet the preservation standards because it was a historic building happened before we'd actually awarded the HEAL grant, that it excluded a building from getting the HEAL grant. So we want to make sure you don't begin work until we have all those clearances in place. And that's just another thing. If you are in a historic district or your building is on the National Register individually, we do want to make sure that we're meeting all the preservation standards and not doing something that's going to get a project in trouble with SHPO. So make sure we have all those ducks in a row first. Ineligible use of funds, public improvements or publicly owned property. We touched on that a little bit. Projects that have already started or are completed. Same thing. We don't want to get into issues with projects that are already started and the work doesn't meet our standards or SHPO standards. Projects that do not meet the 1-to-1 match. We have to be assured, and if you've answered all the questions in the application, which we reiterate is very much like HEAL, we will, there's a section in there about your match and how that's being funded. Licensing, insurance, taxes, or other expenses not really eligible for use for these funds. Projects outside of the downtown commercial district. Again, we want to see that project is in your Main Street footprint. And projects that do not meet code or design standards, we can't fund those kinds of projects that we knowingly are creating a fire hazard or something. We want to make sure they all meet code and design standards.
So the grant recipients and the property owners will be responsible for obtaining all required permits. Commerce reserves the right to cancel the grant agreement. So once you've been awarded a grant, we'll have an agreement again, just like we've done with HEAL. And I don't anticipate this to be an issue with these grants, but if you're not meeting the grant agreement and following the terms of the grant and doing what you said you would do, then we can cancel that agreement and claw back any funds that have been expended so far. Grant recipients and your program needs to know that we need to know and be able to have access to documents and other information that's related to the execution of the grant and performance of the specific project. This includes photo documentation, budgets, expenditures, those kind of things. So we really would appreciate you doing everything you can to document this with photos as well as you can, and make sure you get before and after photos. And if you need help with how to get good photos, let me know. I know somebody that could help with that.
Scott, we have a couple of questions. Do you want to
Okay.
pause
Yeah.
for that?
Sure.
So Jamie's asking, back to the Airbnb question, in a building with multiple opportunities, can it be mostly residential and a few Airbnb?
That's a great question. I think as long as there's some residential housing as part of the project, that would be fine.
Yeah, I would make the argument as long as the Airbnbs are not the majority of the project, we would definitely consider that project. So.
And then Dion is asking, are architect fees allowable?
That's a good question. I don't think so. Robert, do you recall if those are allowable? I'd have to look at the grant document.
I think in HEAL we did not allow them, but I can't imagine, with the low amount of construction of grant, like a smaller grant, 50,000. I can't imagine any project that's not going to have $50,000 worth of construction costs to make it viable. So
typically that would be a no. I do know one, we're referring to HEAL a lot because we had our hands on that grant program substantially when it started. And
we learned a lot.
we learned a lot. Yeah. But there was a situation where there were some architect and engineer fees that were just out of control. And it frankly sucked up all the HEAL money just in that. And so I would lean towards no, because again, with a grant this size, that 50,000 can be used in construction costs in no time at all. But if you need help with architects and design work, let us know. We can help get you in touch with people and help with working through some of those issues. That's a good question. Any other questions?
Yes, Jennifer is asking if there's a PDF available of the application that she can get out to the applicants to get the information that they need.
There is not, but I will look in Submittable and see if there's a way to do that. I'm not familiar with that, frankly. So when we're done with this call, I'll get into the application in Submittable and see if there's a way to create a PDF from that. If not, we would have to literally type all that stuff and create a separate document, which we probably need to do at some point just to have that on hand. But there isn't right now.
Okay, next question. Jamie's also asking, what about current buildings with residents that are in major need of upgrade? Would these qualify?
Just so I'm clear, this is a building that already has people in an upper floor space living there?
Yes, that's correct. It has, it's very, very old and dilapidated and not up to good standards. And we'd like to go in and redo everything and start from scratch. Is that something that would qualify?
Let's talk about that offline, Jamie. My initial reaction would be no, but if it's, because typically this is for new opportunities, underused space that has the potential to create new housing opportunities.
That's for sure, but it's, yeah.
Right. That's why I don't want to say no, but let's, I'll run that kind of through the channels here at Commerce and we'll see what we can do.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, one of the things we're trying to do is, create new opportunities with these grants and frankly, not reward lack of building maintenance and those folks that for whatever reason just haven't maintained property, which I know is a lot of times that's really what we're doing anyway. But other questions?
Yes, Kylie is asking if our community would get a rooms grant, would we still be eligible for next round of HEAL if they were different projects, just the same community?
Yes. As far as I understand everything with HEAL and the rooms program, you can stack multiple grants for the rooms grants. So now I'm not sure, Robert, do you remember if we can stack HEAL and rooms? I don't think
Well, initially we were thinking, no, we could not stack it, but I don't think we've actually got definitive answer on that from David, basically. Let us get back to you. We'll send out an email with an answer to that question about stacking it. But I think Kylie's, if you get a rooms grant, it will not exclude you from getting a HEAL grant for a separate building for sure. But
correct. Yeah, that's true.
yeah, so I think that answers that question, but we'll get an answer about the stacking HEAL and this together definitively and get it out to everybody.
But you can't match, right, HEAL with rooms.
Yeah, the one-to-one match needs to be private funds.
So it's just stacked, but
Yeah,
not,
you can't match a HEAL program with a rooms
Right.
HEAL funding with rooms funding.
right,
But
okay.
I could imagine a scenario where somebody's match might be an RHID or, I mean, some other form of funding that's outside of commerce, and that could count as a match.
Correct.
Or MIH or whatever. So
CDBG funds are in commerce, but that would be an eligible funding
stack.
source as well. Yeah.
Okay,
We have a couple more questions. Casey is asking, are expenses that allow ingress, egress to upper stories of buildings like slip cover removal allowable expenditures?
I would say yes.
For sure the egress issue, that if you're upgrading stairways and stuff like that, slip cover removal, you're probably talking about a bigger project than just a HEAL. I mean, yeah, if it's part of your project, sure, you can add rooms to the mix, but 50,000 isn't going to go very far for upstairs housing if you are also removing a slip cover. But I don't think it excludes slip covers if that's part of the project. Casey, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think, slip covers becomes the, wasted dollars. It doesn't create any profit. So we could say there was a grant that helped take care of that portion of the project. I think there are a couple of different projects I can think of downtown that might want to jump in.
Well, there's also the issue that some upstairs housing doesn't work unless you remove the slip cover to have operable windows. So
yeah, our fire marshal won't sign off on it if they have a slip cover that blocks the window access.
yeah, so I think we can include it, but that shouldn't be the primary purpose of the grant, is to remove the slip cover, because we do, like HEAL, want a completed project at the end of the grant period. So
Complete a project with a tenant in place.
yeah.
And we'll get to that here in a little bit. Great questions. Other questions?
I have one more. James is just asking if we can send out the slide deck from this meeting after so that he can share it with other property owners.
We will do that, and we
could
will
also
actually,
send the recording, right?
yeah, we'll send this recording and the slide deck out. The recording might not be out until Monday, because all these Zoom meetings go through IT. We're not the actual host, the Kansas Main Street, so we have to get that information from them. They're quick about it, but we'll get the video out as soon as possible, and we'll get the slide deck out this afternoon.
That's all the questions I have for now.
All right, thanks, Debbie. All right, so the criteria to be evaluated, again, that the project creates long-term housing in the upper floor space of downtown building, the magnitude of need, the private match, pro forma budget and overall plan for the project is important. I can tell you, that's probably an area in other grant programs that we've seen in commerce that people really struggle. I don't anticipate that to be as much of an issue with you all because you get this more than some communities that don't have an organization like you in place. So, but that's really important. And again, those upper floor housing workshops we've had, have gone through how to do those things. But if you need help with that, let us know. And if the project addresses a local transformation strategy, that helps as well. And then the timeline, again, the portal went live last Friday. And hopefully you all have been able to access that. If you haven't, let us know. I think Debbie will be dropping that link in the chat, so you'll have access to that again. I would encourage you to at least look through that as soon as possible and not wait till the May 31st deadline. We had that situation come up with some other grants recently that people just weren't familiar enough with the process and they waited to the last minute to start on that. And it was extremely difficult to get that done. The applications are due Friday, May 31st. Again, if you've got HEAL grants that you've applied for or are thinking about applying for that include upper floor housing, by all means, you can roll those into this grant program and apply for them there. And it won't affect, like Robert said, we talked about earlier, it won't affect your HEAL. I mean, you can't apply for the same grant for HEAL and rooms, pick one or the other, but if you get a rooms grant, it's not going to exclude you from future HEAL grants. We will announce the awards the week of June 17th. We're not sure the exact date that announcement will be made, but it will be sometime that week. The projects need to start September 1 of this year with completion of July 1, 2026. So you have almost 2 years to complete the construction. Sooner is better if you can do that. And then have a tenant in place September 1. That says 2025, but that's 2026. Apologize for that typo. So construction complete July of 26, tenant in place September of 2025. So we've covered a lot of questions, but if you want to come off mute and have any questions or type them in the chat, that's what we're here for. We want to do what we can to answer your questions today.
We're talking about, we know we can't match the HEAL and the rooms grant, but we could have them in the same capital stack for a single project. Not for this round, I can't pull that off, but I'm just thinking in terms of one that's going to take a little longer to develop.
We're going to double check that and we will
Okay.
let you know soon.
I'm sorry to ask you to repeat it.
Oh, no, we'll have answers for you Monday.
Great, thank you.
That's a great question, though.
I was going to say, don't feel bad, Emily. I'm the grant writer up here in Republic County. We've got a property that's like 3 buildings, 1 property. It's already received HEAL grants, and that the owners there are like, oh, we'd love to pursue this if we can. So I'm in there just like, do I type it now? Do I ask again? I know everybody's asked, but I just want to be clear. So I appreciate it.
Will Robert work to be our liaison with SHPO to make sure that if we get an award that was granted the week of June 17th, that we get through the review process to allow for construction by that September deadline?
Casey, I'm happy to talk about that for a second. For the first time in probably close to 2 years, SHPO has informed me that they're fully staffed. All their positions are open and they have a 3rd tax credit reviewer, which is good news. It will take a little bit to get all of those people up to speed, but I think we will see some of those deadlines that were being missed be more thoroughly, taken care of. So the other thing that they have started doing on the last round of HEAL is reviewing only the portions of the projects that are being funded for state law review. So they're not doing a full project review for every HEAL application, and I expect that may be the same for rooms. I'm told right now they are on deadline to have, like, they are currently caught up and reviewing projects within the 30-day period. But that being said, I will help shepherd any project that is awarded a HEAL program through SHPO. I'm happy to do that. And sometimes I can get an answer faster than somebody who just sends a blind email to SHPO. So I do have back channel. We use Teams, and I can send them a question through Teams and get answers usually within a day or two. So
Could I ask Casey for a little clarification here? Because in the way we sequence our project outlines and feasibility and all of the rest includes an inspection by SHPO in terms of not planning to do anything that would jeopardize the potential for tax credits before we apply for the grant, because the tax credit approval, we don't want our plans to suddenly say, hey, you can't do that after you get awarded the grant for tax credits in particular, but also making sure that we're meeting the standards correctly in terms of our remodel projections. And so to get the budget straight, we want to see SHPO first. But if I've got this straight, Casey, you wait till after you get the grant. Is that right?
No, I think there are some projects that can't greenlight until they have their finance in place. And they don't want to make the expenditure for a tax credit consultant or spend the time on some of the part 2 elements until that they know they can actually finance the project. In those instances, I think sometimes there's a window where project parameters can change. We just want to make sure that our idea of historic preservation and their idea of the developer's idea of historic preservation, and then the National Park Service idea of historic preservation needs to line up so that
Right.
all of those different finance pieces can fall into place.
We have at the moment, Robert, it's such good news about fully staffed SHPO, because we have 6 projects and 2 architects that are waiting just for a return telephone call to see when they can come down and look at these projects and give us their best thought on what we can do to be the very best partners with SHPO as we go forward. And we can't get a response yet. We haven't for the last 3 weeks in any case.
Emily, send me an email of what the projects are
Okay.
and what you're trying to accomplish getting them down there.
Okay.
And I will send them an email saying, hey, I want to come down there with you and see if I can get a response from. I'm doing the same thing for a project in Marysville, and Kylie, you'll be happy to know I'm probably going to ask them on that same trip to Marysville if they could look at the theater that we looked at this week. I'm happy to facilitate in any way I can to get these projects looked at by SHPO up front, rather than being so reactionary after all the architect's drawings are done. So
well, I mean, we love SHPO and they do a great job. It's not that, and we know they're really pressed, but when deadlines are looming really close, it's hard to, I mean, it's just hard. These are all upper story except one, which is a theater that has to do with a different project that we may fold it into. We don't need to talk about that now, but so I'd appreciate it, and I will email you right away.
I have a question here from Jennifer. The address that's being requested on the first page of the application, do you want the address for ourselves as far as the app when you apply, or the project address?
I don't have the application open right now, but if I recall, there's a place for the application of you, the applicant, and and a space for the address of both the applicant and the property owner. I'll double check that though, and if it looks different than that, we'll
There-
make sure that's,
There is, but there's also an address on the very first page before you can move on. To enter in the address for the organization and for the building owner. And so I didn't know which address to use on that first page.
I'll double check the application and let you know, Jennifer.
I think the first question, if I remember from Heel, Scott, was basically that you're establishing the name of the project. And from then on, that is the name of the project when we go to review it. So I believe that's actually the building address in Heel. I haven't looked that closely at the rooms, but I think it wanted you to name the project in a very specific order, like city and address or address and city or something like that.
Right. That's
And
what I
that's
recall
when
as
we're
well.
Looking through the applications, we can quickly identify the location of the project, because some people will put just a building name and that doesn't tell us anything when we're just looking at a list of applications. So
Real quick, I have one more question. I know I asked you this, Scott, on email about like us sharing it to our own social media to like let our members know about this opportunity. Is it okay if we use that room's like logo and such to share? Okay, perfect.
Yes.
no,
Yeah.
I have a copyright on that. No, you can't. Yes.
You
And
need to
also,
talk.
thank you, Robert.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
you need to talk to Robert's agent about using that. Great questions, everybody. Thanks for being here this morning. We're not going to keep your time. I put our contact information up on the last screen, but you all know how to get hold of us. So I can't emphasize enough, don't hesitate to reach out to any of us three if you have any questions, because we're here to help, and we know the timeline is short and we want to do what we can to get you in the loop and applying and be successful with this. So
Thank you,
thanks.
guys.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for being here, everybody. Have a great day. Stay safe with the weather, and we'll talk soon.